Before I am going to continue with the next remediation steps, I want to explain a little bit about remediating AWS access keys. Typically, you're going to have either a user or a role that can access your AWS resources. You might have a user with a login and a password that then can log into the AWS console, or you might have a role that you might use using an identity provider like Okta or OneLogin or Active Directory, or a role using single sign-on using the IAM Identity Center. There's definitely more ways to use roles, but as a person having access to AWS, it's often going to be one of these ways to gain access to AWS resources. So let's have a look at the user first and then at the roles. This is an example user I have created. I have a user without MFA. That's already not best practice because for every user you create, you should enable MFA, multi-factor authentication, a second key like a 6-digit code or a YubiKey or something similar. And this user has one access key that is active. This user has a policy attached, the Amazon EC2 read-only access. So I could use this user either to log into the AWS console, or I could use the access key to gain programmatic access, for example, using the AWS CLI or tools like Terraform to configure or describe AWS resources using the command line or programmatically. If then I need to rotate my access key, for example, I've been using this access key for a couple of months and I already don't know anymore where exactly I put the access key, so there's no breach, I didn't lose the access key, but just as a precaution, I want to rotate my access key. How would that work? I would first create a new access key. And because I'm using an access key for a user, Amazon recommends you to use some alternatives. But for now, I'm going to continue because even though there are better alternatives, there's still a lot of AWS customers using this approach. So now I have a new key. So I have my old key, my old access key here. This is my old access key. And also you can see that this is a user access key because it starts with the letters AKIA. That means it's a user access key. If it is an access key issued using roles, it will start with AS instead of AK. So this is a user access key and I want to rotate it. So now that I have my newly created one, this is my newly created one, I will configure this newly created key in my application or locally to use the AWS CLI. Once I have configured the key, I will remove the old one. So I can then say actions deactivate. And then it says you cannot use inactive keys to make AWS calls. So I deactivate it. So now the old key is not active anymore. I cannot use the old key anymore. So anything that is still configured using old key will not work anymore. But I'll be able to use my new key, which is rotated. You can use deactivate just to check whether not something big breaks. For example, let's say you configure this key in a CI/CD pipeline and suddenly it breaks. So now you can still revert it by activating it again. Once you're sure you don't need it anymore, you can just delete the access key. But then you will also not be able to recover it anymore. So now it is removed. So this is rotating. Let's say that you have a breach of your access key, this one, for example, and you need to just stop using it. You wouldn't create a new key. You would just immediately go to actions and deactivate or delete to make sure that the key doesn't work anymore. So that's what you would typically do for a user access key. You can just go in and delete the access key. So if this one would be breached, I would just deactivate it or immediately delete it. So if I go to delete, AWS is actually trying to be helpful by saying we recommend analyzing the impact of deactivating it first and then deleting it. So first you would deactivate it, then you would delete it. So if this one would be breached, then we would just delete it. Sounds obvious, but now that we are going to the roles, I also created an example role here. The approach is different.